Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show. Welcome to Culture Before Content. And thank you for joining us on the Music for All podcast network. We are thankful for our support from Yamaha, who is our national presenting sponsor. At Music for All and for all of us, the mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music, which is, I think, pretty much why we all do it. I'm David Duarte. I'm your host for today. We're on episode 19. Can you believe it? 19. Whether you're joining us live via Facebook Live or YouTube, we're thrilled to have you with us. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, just thank you for listening. You're in the past at this point. So anyway, thank you. You can catch the broadcast at any time on Facebook. For those of you tuning in on Facebook Live, remember to like and share the broadcast and don't hesitate to leave comments and thoughts. Well, here's a thought. Like, hey, why don't you, while you're in there, what was your last day of school? When is your last day of school? Like, here's my scary thing. I still have 2 weeks and 2 days to go until my last day of school. When was yours? All right, back to the show. If you're on YouTube, show your support by hitting the like and subscribe button to our channel and share this video across your social media platforms. You can stay connected throughout the week by diving deeper into our podcast, as new episodes are available during the week on the Music for All podcast network on both Apple and Spotify, which is perfect for tuning in on the go and keeping the culture alive wherever you go, because your engagement truly matters. I'm getting so much feedback from people, and I am very inspired of all the comments that I'm getting back. But because if you share, we all share, and we all get our little bit of culture for us. All right, let's talk a little bit about last week. Last week we had Dr. Matthew Arau. He is the founder of Upbeat Global, and if you were with us, it was a really entertaining show. He shared his whole Upbeat book about mindset, mindful, and leadership in music education and beyond, and we got into really good conversations about his leadership and culture and all those things. And I would tell you, go back and watch that show, get a hold of that book, and I think you will enjoy it. Every bit of it. But enough about last week. Let's get on to this week. This is my favorite part, meeting somebody brand new today. Today is my first day of meeting somebody. In 2021, Yamaha launched the 40 Under 40 to celebrate and recognize outstanding music educators. And we are very lucky to have one of those with us today in 2023 for making a difference by growing and strengthening their music programs. We have Jabari Tovar, who is known for a culturally responsive curriculum, which is one of his tenets of his teaching philosophy. He's an instrumental music teacher and percussion specialist. I'm always fascinated by percussion specialists at Salem Public Schools in Massachusetts. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Jabari Tovar.
Wow, that was a great introduction.
I told you I'm getting more comfortable with my things here. I'm sorry, and to my audience, I'm sorry. I have my sexy jazz voice today. I found out these little weed things are growing and sprouting, and oh boy, I get to feel a little bit of. So we've got our tea here today. All right, well, let's get on to the show. Enough about me. So, Mr. Tovar, Jabari, tell us who you are.
So I am Jabari Tovar. I am originally from Salem, Massachusetts, and now I serve as the Percussion Director for Salem Public Schools. So that means I work with percussion students grades 4 through 12, and I teach lessons every day, and I'm in band rehearsals. And when I'm not doing that after school, I serve as the Percussion Director for the Salem High School Marching Band and the Salem High School Indoor Percussion Ensemble.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, if I think I'm right, you grew up in the Salem public system. Is that true?
Yes, I am from Salem, Mass. I've lived here all my life. I went to the schools that I currently teach in now. And it's a beautiful thing. It was very odd at first having former teachers become coworkers. But we've navigated those bumps, and now all my colleagues see me as just Mr. Tovar and not the 12-year-old that was running around in the back of the band room that didn't have his music and all that stuff.
Don't lie. You're still the 12-year-old that runs around the back of the band.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
I have met a few percussionists in my lifetime, and so it's. I think when you finally become instructors, you become this model. But in your heart of hearts, there's a reason you've got all this energy that goes along. But I know for a fact we talked a little bit about before we came on the show about how you came through an alternative path or wanted to talk about an alternative path to becoming a music educator. Can you expand on
Yes.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I went to college, I had no intention of becoming a full-time music teacher. And I have my BA in music, and I was studying with a focus in percussion performance. And I was all in on percussion. I knew it was my passion. I knew I loved it. But I had heard that when you start to teach music in public school, it becomes more about the paperwork and dealing with different policies, and you're overworked, and you never have enough time to do your rehearsals and all the things that you need to do. But what had happened was, when my story, I had graduated in 2016, and in that fall, I graduated spring 2016. Fall 2016, teaching position opened up at the middle school, Collins Middle School. And I decided to take it because it was a short-term position, just 6 weeks as a music substitute. I was teaching general music. And honestly, I had no idea what I was doing, but I totally fell in love with it. And it was a great way to connect with students and to make them aware of aspects of music that they wouldn't normally be aware of, and also take their music that they enjoy, and allow them to look at it and listen to it sort of in a different lens. And once I did that, the rest was kind of history.
Did you ever envision yourself of being a teacher when you were in college and on percussion? And
No.
by the way, this is why I like to get to know people. We have a very similar story. I didn't go to college even as a music major. I went as a business major for four years before I got the bug. And I wonder, it sounds like we had the same change of event, which was I started working with my local high school band. That was right next to my house. And then I found out, hey, this is kind of fun. And so I think it was just that first day of like, I can say things and they liked it. And they do it. It's kind of cool. What were some of the first things that you remember about when you decided to start teaching?
So I was able to teach marching band while I was in college, and marching band that's my jam, right? That's what got me into music in the first place. That was my first real passion with music. And so teaching marching band allowed me to express what's the word? I want to say maybe the intense side. And back when I was in college and I was marching drum corps at the time, I was super strict, right? You do this all the time. You don't talk. You're not late. You do this. You do, like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You do what I say, and that's it. And so when I started teaching general music and I was in public school during the day, that totally flipped. And so I'm working with students that maybe they like music, maybe they hate music, maybe it's literally the last place they would want to be, but for the next 40 or 50 minutes, right, we're here, we got to get some sort of education out of it. What are we going to do? So I remember my first ever class, and I had done no student teaching. I had no classroom experience at all. So it's just me with these kids in the first day, and I sat them in a circle. And I put them all on drums because I'm a percussionist, so that's where I felt most comfortable. And we played this game Orbit, and I still play Orbit to this day. It's a great game where you just pass a pattern around the circle, and hopefully it makes its way back like telephone. And then you pass it around again, and it gets more complex. But it was a great way for me to let them know that, listen, I'm a musician. Right. And yes, I'm a young teacher. Yes, I have no idea what I'm doing. But if you come into this classroom, you're going to learn something about music, whatever it's going to be. Right. But it went well. It honestly was very smooth. And like I said, I play Orbit to this day. So great game.
I'm curious because I'm always fascinated when I find somebody who's like, high functioning musician, and then they go work with the little ones, because I think we all have it within us that we can reach kids, and we all have our own special way of reaching kids. So can you talk about maybe like some of the things the drums must have been really exciting for the kids, or just, keeping them engaged or something. Because I know for me, when I started first working with the little ones, it was just keeping them busy and occupied. But did you ever have any classroom management issues with the kids, or is your personality been one of those ones that just kind of speaks for the kids?
So to answer your first question, if I have classroom management issues, yes, I do. Yes, I do. There were many, many classroom management things that I had to learn as we went, right? And the biggest thing, and obviously with percussion, the biggest thing I tell all my kids is, hey, if I'm talking or you're talking, there can't be any playing, because I want to hear what you have to say and you want to hear what I have to say. And if we break that number one rule, we're going to descend into chaos and nobody has fun. But after that, I think my personality, honestly, and I don't like to talk about myself like this, I think there are aspects of my personality where I was being warm or funny. And to be honest with you, I did try to be the cool teacher my first couple of years. I tried very, very hard to be the cool teacher. And we can get into that later if you want. But honestly, those first couple of years, when I was just sort of building up my own pedagogy, my own management style, I took it day by day, honest.
Yeah, I think that's good for a lot of us to hear, because I think, some of us all think that everything goes perfect all the time. I'm still I'm like I say, I'm only 34 years in, and still to this day, I'm never surprised by some of the management issues that arise or come up. I was watching some stuff today on a teacher talking about cell phones and how that has entered. That wasn't even around. There were no cell phones when I started teaching, and now it seems to be keeping kids away from them, and that goes back to that engagement thing. But how do you think that maybe your background in performance impacted your approach to teaching?
So when I was doing general music, I tried to demonstrate that because I was a disciplined professional musician, right? There are things that we can learn. There are things that you can learn from me, and then there are things that we can learn from each other. Right. And one of the things I taught when I was in general music, I had to teach a guitar unit, and I had played guitar in middle school for a couple weeks. Like, I was reading tabs, like I knew frets, I knew how to tune them, but I tried my best to be honest with them. And I said, listen, I'm not the best guitarist out there, but I'm a great musician, and we're going to learn it together. And that's another thing that I use to this day when I'm talking with my percussionists or high schoolers or whoever it is, where if there's something that I don't know about, I'm upfront and I'm honest with them. And I say, we're going to make some mistakes, but we're going to learn about this together, and we're going to grow. And then on the other side of it, we're going to come out much stronger and much better.
So that brings up more questions. Like, what were some of those pivotal moments and experiences that influenced your decision to transition into the public school system?
So the following year, after I did my stint in general music, I switched over to percussion, and I was teaching percussion part-time and like a little bit of saxophone. And that's another story where I had to pick up saxophone and in 2 weeks start teaching fourth graders, but we can get into that later.
There's mine right there.
But really the thing that kind of sparked my interest was the first moments when you set up the instrument for the first time, you teach them the grip for the first time, you teach them buzz rolls or major scales or whatever it is, and the look of excitement that these kids get, that never gets old. It never, ever, ever, ever gets old. And I do my best to try to find those moments every single day. And as long as I have one of those moments where a student has a breakthrough, they have a major realization, and they just go, wow, I didn't know I could do that. That's what keeps me going every single day.
Do you have any advice for like teachers who are starting kids on percussion? Like, I always say this, like, I have a percussion class, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I this is what you just said. I'm still a great musician in my head, and just because I switched to percussion, it doesn't change. It just means I find out that I'm completely uncoordinated. I learned that by switching to percussion. But what are some of the things that you would advise somebody who's starting kids on percussion? What are some of those, Jabari? This has to happen before we start percussion.
So starting beginner percussionists is always really interesting, because at least in my program, right, the fourth graders, they get the bell kit, right? So we're doing drum pad and we're doing mallets. And the biggest advice I would give to someone teaching a beginner percussion class is just to start slow. Take every minute to make sure they know exactly how to set up their instrument at the right height. Make sure they know exactly how to hold the sticks and how to hold the mallets. And the big challenge with percussionists is that we have 2 instruments that we have to learn at the beginning of our careers. And then we add on tambourine, we add on cymbals, we add on timpani, we add on marimba, we add on all these other instruments. And for me personally, I do my best to have I don't want to say a general approach, but I need to be able to play a snare drum solo and then pivot to marimba and then pivot to tambourine. And so I do my best to find the commonalities between the instruments. So that way, when I do make that switch, I'm not making wholesale switches. Right. And then that only comes from starting slow and solid fundamentals. And it's cliche, right? Everybody talks about fundamentals as music teachers and as musicians, but it's true. And it's especially true for those beginner percussionists.
Oh, I don't think that changes as you get older. I think that's some of the things I still create my foundation is we have to run all the things that we do that get us there, whether it's stretching, whether it's playing, just go through those things just because it's habits. And then here's another question that popped in my head. It's like, you talked about the bell kit and you talked about the snare drum. Because I know some teachers, hey, this kid's my best snare drummer. This kid's my best bass drummer. This one kid is my mallet player. What are some advice you have for teachers to get them to like move the kids around and get them playing more than just the one?
So this might be controversial, and I heard this when I attended the Music for All symposium last summer. But my take on it is that in the early years, you try your best to build up the skills equally, right? And you have it's okay to have snare drummers, it's okay to have mallet people, right? But you have to make sure that on their other instrument or instruments that they are either weaker at or they don't like as much, they're just proficient, right? And with my job personally, because I'm able to see all the percussionists grades 4 through 12, I'm able to, over the years, keep track of, this one likes mallets, this one likes snare drum, this one needs more timpani help, this one needs more drum set experience, right? But by the time they get to high school, I have a really solid idea of their likes and dislikes. And I do my best and I work really hard with our band directors to make sure that when we assign these parts that, yes, they're getting at least one piece on their passion instrument, right? I love playing marimba. Please, Mr. Tovar, only have me play marimba. But every now and then, when it's the right piece and it's accessible and it's the right level of challenge for them, you got to flip them, right? And you keep them on their toes. And I tell all my students from day one, right? Percussion is all of these different instruments. So when I started my career, I tried my best to have everybody like equal, right? Everybody, snare drum, perfect. Mallets, perfect. Timpani, perfect. Drum set, perfect. And that didn't happen, obviously, because we're human beings and that just, you run out of time and kids become disinterested. So I know their favorites and I know where they're comfortable, but as their teacher, I also know when to push them and when to give them that extra challenge so they're getting the full, well-rounded percussionist experience.
Which is, again, how do you assess growth and development for your students? Like, what are some of the ways that you do that? Because you say you got them from elementary to high school, right? Yep. And so, and you do have the extra advantage of you have marching percussion on top of that. I don't have that at my school. I had to learn that's something I kind of had to. I'm trying to create that thing because I'm so used to having a marching band program that when percussionists get to high school, that is a whole different ball game of interactivity. And it's when you don't have it, you don't realize the gem that you have. But how do so how do you assess some of that growth from the kids, or what are some ways that you notice this snare player is becoming good? Maybe it's time more mallets, or maybe this mallet player is good, more snare, or how do you assess? Just how do you get your kids better on all the instruments?
So, in an ideal lesson for me, I'm starting with technique, and everyone's on like instruments. So we're either all doing snare drum, we're all doing mallets. If I have the right class size and the right amount of time, everybody's all on timpani. Those classes are wild, but they're a lot of fun. And so throughout the lessons, I do a lot of informal assessments. And from day one, my students know that in a lesson, you're probably going to play solo for me, for everybody, right? And it's not necessarily a judgment, and it's not to embarrass you, and it's not to make you feel bad. But as your teacher, the best way I can help you is by hearing you play by yourself so I can give you that targeted feedback. So on any given lesson, right, I say, okay, hey, let's do it down the line. We're playing stick control. Let's hear line number 5 right down the line. And I let everybody play. And if they're nervous or if they make a mistake, I say, okay, go again, do your best. But really the big thing in terms of growth and assessment is concerts. I mean, that's why the kids sign up. That's why we do what we do, to be able to perform in front of people. And I didn't think I'd ever become this person, but now during my concerts, I'm sitting in the back of the auditorium with my iPad and I'm taking notes and I'm saying, oh, all right, this person's good on timpani. We got to switch them now. Oh, wow, that crash cymbal technique needs a lot of work. We got to make sure we hit that in lessons. And the thing with concerts, right? Concerts are, I don't want to say few and far between, but we have, 3 or 4, depending on scheduling in the school year. But it's a mix between those informal assessments. I also do formal assessments where we do playing tests and the kids will play for me, and they'll get a grade for that, the concerts. And then the really big thing, and this helps me a lot, I'm able to be scheduled during ensemble rehearsals. Oh. So there are times during the school day where a band director is running their rehearsal and I'm either in the back helping or guiding or doing whatever I need to assist students, or I'm in the front of the room and I'm watching and I'm listening. And again, with my iPad, I'm taking those notes. So I know, oh, we gotta hit that in lessons come next Tuesday.
I'm old school. Here's my iPad.
Hey, it never runs out of battery, right?
No, I can certainly lose it a lot easier than that. I would never lose my iPad. But it's kind of funny. I always say to this, you work with your students every day, and then you get into a concert setting, and then you kind of sit back if somebody's like working with them, and you go, "Oh my gosh, I just heard something for the first. How did I not hear this for the last 5 or 6 weeks?" I do that all the time. It's funny you say that. My concert's this Tuesday. My final concert's finally coming, and then you get to Friday's rehearsal, and like, oh my god, why have I not done and all those things. Do you have some methods that you use, or maybe is there a certain system that you use for your percussion kids, the elementary kids, the middle school kids, the high school kids? Is there something something you use, or something that's popular that you use
in terms of concerts?
In terms of prepping your kids to play, you have warm-ups, those kinds of things. Do you have a standard one, something that you use?
Yeah, so usually for the warm-ups, I try to keep them brief right before the concert, and we'll play 8 on a hand, we'll play major scales up and down the instrument. And the biggest thing I do leading up to the concert, right, and this will be maybe 2-3 weeks out, right? So I'll tell my students, hey, before we play, I want you to visualize. Okay, we're in the auditorium, or for elementary or middle school students, we're in the gym. We're in the cafeteria, right? You have all of your peers watching you. You got your parents, everybody's cheering for you, right? How are you going to perform, right? And that usually makes them nervous, right? But I tell them, right, once we start the piece and once the concert starts, right, it's not stopping until the piece is over, right? So it's really, really important that once you start playing, if you make a mistake, if you get lost, whatever it is, you just keep going. And so I think that sort of visualization, and it's almost like a mental practice, I would say, that helps ease some nerves as we go into concerts. And listen, with the elementary schools, we're always going to have the criers. They're going to cry, and that's okay. And I tell them I cried at my first violin recital and it was terrible, and that's okay, right? But the really important thing is you make it to the end of the piece, so that way the audience claps for you and you can receive your reward for all the hard work that you've been doing this semester or concert cycle or whatever you want to call it.
How long do you do between I mean probably different for different ages. How long is it from an elementary to a concert, or the high school kids to a concert?
So it really depends. At the high school, we have a fall, winter, and spring concert. For our elementary school kids, we do a winter concert and then a spring concert. Yeah. So with the high schoolers, they're a little bit more active just because they're older and they can handle it. But the elementary school kids, and it's hard for them because they'll have a great performance in the beginning of the school year, and then we have to go through pretty much the entire spring, and then actually around now, right, I'm coming up on my concert week, is their now end of school year concerts.
Right. Because I was thinking of some of the strategies that you use to keep the kids motivated. Because if it's, if you have, 2 concerts a year and, it's like for the elementary kids, how do you keep those positive interactions? How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep yourself motivated during these live?
So with the students, and especially with the younger ones in percussion, it's really exciting when you get to introduce a new instrument. And we start, like I said earlier, we start with the bell kit, right? In 4th grade, you get the drum pad, you get the bells, and that's it for the first couple months. And then after your first concert, we add on snare drum and bass drum. And I get the, oh my God, I'm going to play that huge thing. And these kids, like their eyes get so wide and it's really exciting. And then we add on cymbals, and then we add on triangle. So I guess from my percussionist perspective, because I get to add on these exciting instruments as the year goes on, that kind of generates some excitement for me, which is good. And the other thing that I like to do, and this is again specific for percussion, because I'm able to have students play on drums, which is a atonal instrument, if you want to call it that, I use a lot of backing tracks. I use a lot of backing tracks for warm-ups, and I'm able to take requests. And for my middle schoolers and for my high schoolers, I'll say, hey, does anybody have a recommendation for a warm-up today? And so they get to put their own spin on it and their own sort of musical taste. And in a way, they get to express themselves a little bit because they're putting their own taste out there, not just for me, but for the rest of the class, right? So using the backing tracks is a really, really great way to keep things fresh and keep things moving. So that way, when they're playing 8 on a hand or double beat for the 1,000th time, it's like, oh, it's something different, right? It's a different groove. It's something different for my mind to latch onto.
What's something recent that the kids have picked?
So I had a student.
Oh, see, I got the same question. Cabrizi, what's the best request? See, we have the same. Thank you, Cabrizi, because I was the same way. We got a few more questions coming here, but what's the best request you've gotten from the kids? I'll take that. So that's kind of my question.
So I had a request from a freshman the other day for the new JoJo Siwa song, Karma. I don't know if you've heard of it. If you play it for your kids, definitely the radio version, right? Or the instrumental version. That was a riot. And I don't know how much, I can't believe we're talking about JoJo Siwa right now. I don't know how much you know about JoJo Siwa, right? She was a dancer, right? And she is a dancer. So I asked my student, I said, hey, if I'm gonna play the song, you got to do the dance for us in front of everybody. And you know what? She did the dance. Shout out to Rose.
I do know. I remember.
Yep. So that was a really popular request. I get requests for anime music all the time. Oh wow. I have a student we're working on Overtaken from One Piece, which is like longest running anime of all time. And anytime I play an anime song, I have elementary and middle school and high school kids. They are super, super, super into it.
Oh my gosh, it's like nationwide. Every kid's into anime. We did solo ensemble this last week, and even the kids were trying to pick something. They just like picking something. But I'm shocked. But actually, some of that music is really good.
Oh, it's incredible! It's absolutely amazing.
And that's the other thing. When students have a choice, I think that's when we get the best of them. Let them have the choice to have that. Which is why I asked about what's the best request. What's anything shocked you about a request that a kid like, what, you picked that? Where did you learn that from?
Yeah, I had another high schooler who requested Radiohead the other day. And I was like, you're a little young for Radiohead, aren't you? But I think Radiohead has come back on TikTok a little bit. And obviously, legendary band, right? That kind of music never really goes out of style. But I was not expecting that. And the kids, they liked it. They were really into it.
All right. You know Trisha Peeney? Does that sound right?
I do know Trisha Peeney.
Well, she's hopping in late, but she says she's lucky to have you in our school system. I'm a little envious. I want you in my school system. Like I said, I have a fascination for percussionists because I feel like it's like that's the one, no matter how much of an instrumentalist I am, and no matter how much I study, I can never be that percussionist that I know that you are in your head. And I'm envious about that skill set. And I'm that guy that wants to ask him, like, well, how do you do this? What sticks do you recommend? Well, what's the best stand? What kind of marimba? Which the one should I get? What about chime mallets? How high should I hold the triangle? Those are like, some of my amazing questions to ask. But I think the kids keep us young, but sometimes we have to keep ourselves young too. And so that, like I said, that sounds like you have some amazing relationships with your kid. Do you have any really memorable moments from the last couple of years, or something that stands out that's really impacted you?
Yeah, I have a couple. So I working with the marching band. One of the things, especially when you're in competitive marching band, that you have to make sure you have taken care of is your setup when you're in your performances, right? Because every competition circuit has very strict rules. They have a timing judge, right? So all they do is make sure people are getting on and off the field in the right amount of time, and if not, you get penalized. So this past marching band season, we're in the middle of our setup and we're in mid-season, so it's already pretty, high stakes. And our drum major, who is also a percussionist, our drum major walked up to the announcer in the middle of our setup, and our drum major said, "Hi, my name is Thais Saldivar Diaz. Can you please make sure you pronounce my name correctly over the microphone?" And in the middle of our setup, and I'm plugging things in, I'm doing all this crazy stuff, Thais said that, and I legitimately froze, because it was such an empowering moment. And the fact that they had the courage and the confidence to say, "Hey, make sure you say my name right, because I deserve it," right? That was one of the most impactful moments of my career so far.
Well, that might
And
be a chance. I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm sorry.
and I told Thais afterwards, I was incredibly proud. And as somebody who has a name that gets mispronounced all the time, and as somebody who is in the past, I've just said, "Oh yeah, say it however you want. I don't care." That flipped it for me. That totally flipped the script. And so now when people mispronounce my name, I go, hey, Jabari Tovar, just sound it out. You're going to be okay. We'll work through it together. But it was an incredible moment. And I love those moments when my students teach me things. It's awesome.
Well, that's why I said you kind of got me now shifting over to the culturally responsive side, because I know that's one of your big things is culturally responsive, and that seems to be a start of it. So what I mean, looking at my last name, trust me, I've lived through I don't think anybody's ever said my last name correctly. I think we've anglicized my last name to Duarte, whatever. I don't even know what my last name is. It's Duarte, whatever. Close enough.
So how do you want it to be pronounced?
In school or in real life? Because it's almost two things. Because I know my family grew up Duarte. My dad was very Hispanic. He's Mexican, short little dude. And so he kind of like wanted us to grow up in society. This is like my cultural thing, is that he wanted us to grow up in society to be successful, and that's what his generation was like. So I learned my last name was Duarte. And that's what I learned. But then you go to your grandmother's house and she's like, "Duarte," and I'm like, "What?" And I always say this, when we learn names, especially Latin-based names, there's only like one way to say it. There's Duarte. And so how do I want to say it? What Duarte is fine. Mr. Duarte is fine. But if you really want to say it, I'm always impressed when I meet, Hispanic. I get to hear my name, and it just feels so good to hear your name said correctly.
Yep. And especially for younger students, when they're still kind of learning how the world works and they're learning how they fit into it, right? If you think about how many times in school someone's name gets said, right? To hear that name be mispronounced over and over and over, I think, there's something to be said where it may make a student feel maybe unwelcomed or not wanted or not important as other people who have commonly pronounced names.
Well, I can say, I think maybe we as teachers need to be more cognizant of that, because I mispronounced the kid's name for 6 months when I started this job. And the reason was I didn't think to myself, she was not going to correct me on she didn't feel it her place to correct me on her name. And then I heard a kid call her, and I was like, "Wait, can you say your name for me, please?" Like, "Why didn't you correct me?" "Well, I didn't feel comfortable." And then I'm like, it was like one of those aha moments. It's like, I need to have a better game at the beginning of the year. Let's have an introduction game, introduce yourself,
Yeah.
And so, that was one of those things that just, I think it bothers me that I went through. It's like literally 6 months. I also had another student, funny thing, before when I left Arizona, did the same thing. I didn't realize I was saying the name wrong. And so I think it's one of those responsibilities I have become very aware of now. And now I substitute, when you substitute in a classroom, I just take my little roll sheet. I go, what's your last name? And that's my name. So tell me what your last name. I can usually figure out first names, or can you? If I don't really know, hey, can you say your first name for me? But I've learned to give the kid the chance to get A, tell me who you are, but B, let me hear how you want to be called. And even though also in this, sometimes like my name's David. Guess what my name gets shortened to all the time? Dave
or Davey. Yeah. I almost said Davey. Probably don't.
Oh my Lord, Davey. Oh yeah, I got totally harassed with Davy Crockett, the song, when I was a little kid. Oh, I hated that song. But yeah, people call my Dave. I remember it was my elementary school principal called me Dave the first time. So I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. We'll just go with that for a while. And it lasted like 20 years. So if you know me from like my 20s and 30s, you're going to call me Dave. I don't think I've ever heard my family call me Dave. Not even once. I have no, and people say, what do you want to be called? David. And if you call me Dave, it's fine. And it truly does. But if it's one of those things, what do I want and what do I expect? Two different things. And I think that's really important to kids, giving that same thing. So, I don't correct people, if they call me Dave or David, I've just said, it's fine. But in school, I don't even worry about it. My name's Mr. Duarte. It's funny because the parents, no matter what, you've lost your first name, no matter what. And so at least that's part of it. What kind of other cultural things do you think that you have come across in your teaching?
So in Salem, we have a lot of great diversity with a significant amount of the population coming from the Dominican Republic. And one of the things that I've tried to do in the past few years is to program music that's traditional to the Dominican Republic. And it's getting better in terms of finding repertoire. And like, I'm specifically talking about band repertoire from the DR. But it's not there yet in terms of quantity, right?
Right.
And so what I've done the past few years and what members of my team have done is actually arrange pieces that we find from either folk songs or traditional tunes. And that has been super, super, super powerful. I arranged the piece Pinpon es un muñeco. And Pinpon is this little cardboard doll, and they use this doll to help teach, morals to young kids and hygiene and really, really basic things that, every human needs. And I arranged this piece for bells, and my fourth graders played it at the winter concert. And this is another moment I'll never forget. One of my students, who is Dominican American, he told me, he said, my mom used to sing me this song every night before I went to bed. And I had no idea about this, right? I learned the song after like weeks and weeks and weeks of YouTube research, right? And my student told me that, and I was shocked, and like, this is powerful stuff that we're doing. And it's a folk song, right? And we have folk songs in America. There's folk songs all over the place. But the fact that we are able to take this folk song from the DR and play it in Salem, Massachusetts in the auditorium, right? That was a huge, huge deal.
Do you think it made some impact on those students?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think, and this might be another sort of controversial statement, I don't know how much kids know about folk songs, like American folk songs nowadays. Like, I think they're losing their sort of connection or their touch, right? But folk songs will never go away because that's what, like, they just pass down from generation to generation. But absolutely, I thought it was impactful. It was impactful for me. So I assume that it was impactful for them to see this sheet of music and go, wait a minute, I already know this song, right? I already know this one. I know the words. I can sing along.
Wow, I'm trying to think of, it looks like we have another comment. It's from other comments. I'm sorry that they had to leave the great podcast today. Time to roller skate with the kids. We're still, you're here. That's from Brendan and Dana Wilson. Those are some of my parents from my band program. Thank you for coming. But yeah, I always think to myself that sometimes we need to invest in what the kids know more. As a high school band director, I think sometimes I get way too invested in performance. This is the music we're playing, lather, rinse, repeat, and spending more some of those times. I have been very purposeful on trying to increase some of those things, do things that the kids either want to do or should do, and try to get them to talk. Like we talked about the solo ensemble unit, one of the things I just wanted to find out the name of the piece, find out why the name of the piece, find out the composer, why the composer, and see if you can find out any information on the song. That's funny because we talked about that anime. That's what I told the kids. You're probably going to have to find out where the music's from. That's probably might need some of the only information that you find is where the music's from or other things. But, if we get the kids to invest in it, they might discover something. They might discover, you never know when one moment in music makes an impact for a lifetime,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm fortunate where with my side job, working with marching band and working with indoor percussion, since we arrange the shows, we're actually able to select some of the songs that I know that my students already like and they're already invested in. And I actually, leading up to each season and when we start designing and when we start thinking about what sort of shows or themes we put on the field, my students don't know this, and I've never actually said this out loud. So if my students are listening, close their ears.
Well, now it's going public here.
But I do a little bit of market research, and I'll just ask my students like, "Hey, what do you think of this song? Or what do you think of this artist? Have you heard it?" And based on their reaction, right? If I'm getting, warm, "Oh my God, this one's so cool. I love this song," then that piece goes on the list or that artist goes on the list. But if I get sort of a flat face, like, "Oh, it's all right," then I sort of put that off the list because maybe I'm not going to get the same level of engagement or the same level of attachment that I would with something else. So it's really tricky. It's really tricky. And you have to make sure you ask a bunch of students, because if you just have your one or two favorites, then it's not going to go well for the rest of the band or the rest of the ensemble. But I have a couple of key people where they're kind of like the tastemakers.
What I was just curious, like on your school, are there certain kids that are like dominant in that, or are there some, do you ever find kids that are never like those that speak up that might all of a sudden input some of their opinions into the mix?
Yeah, so that's really part of it, right? And I have my students that are loud and boisterous, and they just are friends with everybody, right? They're very popular. But I also make sure to key into those students that are a little bit quieter, and maybe they're not saying, "Oh my gosh, I love this song, I love this movie," right? But I do my best to get a good cross section of the ensemble to make sure I'm getting as many people on board as possible. And I'll never have everybody, love every single song that we pick or we arrange or we perform or whatever. But if I can get a large majority of the students on board where from day one they go, "I love this song. This is awesome. I'm so excited about this direction that we're taking," then I think I've done my job.
Oh, I'm more than done your job. I think kids, again, I keep using this statement too, which is people remember us for how we make them feel. And if we don't spend our time making them feel, and sometimes I remember that as like, I was talking to another band director the other day, and we were talking about just creating a connection with the kids. How do you get your kids to do this? And I'm like, I have to think through why I do things or how come I know it's going to work. And I said, part of it is I have so much experience. I just know it is. And you talked about music choices. Sometimes there's like a piece of music, and I always tell this piece of music, you might not like it at first, but I would get money. I always should never say that, but I would bet that by the end of this cycle, this might be your favorite piece once we get into it, once we dive into it, once we start looking into those things. So finding some of those caveats. Do you have any special things that you would do to keep yourself motivated during the course of the year?
That's a great question. I was waiting for that one.
I was waiting.
So, in the beginning of my career, I was go, go, go. I taught during the school day, taught private lessons. I was gigging. I was teaching drum corps. I was teaching indoor. Just every day of my life, there was some aspect of music education going on. And that didn't last for very long. And I burned out pretty quick. I burned out very, very, very quickly. And so during the quarantine time, when everybody was stuck at home, one of the aspects of my life that I was able to come back to with all the newfound time that I had was gaming. I was a big, big gamer in middle school and high school. And then when college came around and I decided I wanted to study music, I didn't, one day just say, "Oh, I'm just done with video games." But I knew that I wanted to make it somehow with whatever I did. And I knew it was going to take a lot of time and a lot of dedication. So I was going to have to make some choices. And I chose to just be percussion full time, right? Whether it's during the day or in my free time, I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm listening, I'm practicing, obviously. But during quarantine time, I was able to rediscover the passion that I have for playing video games. And my partner, Sam, is also a huge gamer. And so one of my go-to things to do when I need to de-stress, or if I have time off and I just gotta just chill out, is Sam and I will set up our PCs right next to each other at home, and we're playing games.
That was my next question. I should ask this of the audience too. What is your video game system? So you said PC though, huh?
Yeah, we're playing on PC. And so we are actually in the middle of a move, and we moved to a bigger apartment. And so now we're able to have a separate room just for gaming. And I cannot wait until all the boxes are put away and everything's set up, and we have just one gaming room, and then we have the rest of the apartment to do whatever we want.
And I always say that it's okay to be you. You don't have to be a music teacher 24/7. Talk about somebody who needs to learn that at times. But I have to learn. Here's my funny things. I love video games. I'm so old. You ready for this? I won a Pong at a silent auction in the 70s.
Awesome.
And so that was my, here's my life. Boop, boop. Oh, there's the double one. Boop, boop. It was great. But then I like telling this story to people, but the reason I got video games was because my optometrist told my dad he needs an Atari. His eyes are slow. And so that's how I got it.
Wow.
I got told I need mandatory. Dr. Mario. I saw it came by. I needed mandatory video games. Well, then Atari led to Intellivision, and television led to ColecoVision. ColecoVision is still like the one that made the impact on me. And then I kind of skipped a bit because college got in there and you practice. And then finally the Nintendo snuck in, and I did Nintendo. I now have an Xbox and think it's like the best thing since sliced bread. I tried to get a Sony. I'm just saying, to talk about COVID. Yeah, that kind of ruined my ability to find a video game system that I wanted. And then I found out I was just like the games. So I just play the games. Do you have a genre that you like in particular?
I like RPGs, and I like a lot of action games. Sometimes I just need to shut my brain off, and I just need the flashing lights and the numbers, and that's it. And so those are the perfect games for me when I'm dead tired and I just need a little bit of a break before I do the next thing.
I know I have my control issues, so I know if I'm playing an RPG, I'll do this one more thing. Yeah, that could be 6 hours later, so I probably should not do the one more thing. So right now, until graduation, I am trying not to touch anything so that I can be efficient. I have this fear, but I think that's one of my favorite topics is, we all find our way of who we are outside of music. Cause I'm very happy now that I have definitive times. I'm not a music teacher. Like, Friday at 3:00, I'm done. I'm completely done. The weekend becomes mine. And I don't even worry about my responsibility because I time some of that stuff. But how do you prioritize your time? What are some of the things that you've done?
So this is another lesson I had to learn the hard way, and it took me a long time to figure out. And like you said, with education in general, and especially music education, there are aspects of the job that it almost feels like it's required to work these long hours, and you're at home and you're writing music, you're making lesson plans, or you're setting up for concerts, or you're fixing instruments, or there's so many things outside of the school day and outside of teaching kids that you feel like you have to do. But the fact is, no matter how hard you try, you're never going to get everything done at one time. It's just impossible, right? Our students are always going to make mistakes. There's always going to be broken instruments. There's always going to be scheduling things that you need to fix. There's always going to be new exercises that you need to tweak or sort of adapt into your pedagogy or whatever it is. But for me personally, I've made the commitment to being a music educator for hopefully the rest of my life. And I'm trying really hard to think about the long term and making sure that, like, yes, every day I have my list. I have my list on my phone, and I do my best to check every single thing off of the list. But if 1 or 2 or 3 things at the end of the list aren't checked off, but I had a full day, I taught my best, my students went away better than they arrived to the lesson, that I did my job. And really now my job after hours is to make sure I restore myself and my energy, and I'm ready for the next day, and I can give as close to 100% to my students as possible.
So here's my thing about lists. I find this is my advice to everyone. Do whatever what works for you. I'm not trying to manage y'all. I'm just saying I got advice. Excuse me. My to-do lists are only valid for 24 hours. And I'm not allowed to look at it after the day passes. And then when I start the next day, I have to start a new to-do list. And that has been amazing. Because actually I go back and find, I'm like, I took care of that. When did I take care of that? I think of each day as something is important, and every day is a new day. And so something that was important yesterday, if it was important, I'm going to remember I need to do it. And if I do refer back to some of the old lists, but that's why I say to-do lists are only good for the day that you're in. And I start them up anew again every single day. Because what I've learned is that thing that's number 7 on the list is probably now, maybe it's number 75 the next day. And something that I totally forgot about is number 1 today. And the other advice I have for everyone, this is my other thing, and I don't remember who taught me this, genius, is set timers. You're going to work on something for 10 minutes and you'll be done, and put it down. And that's a hard lesson to learn, because 10 minutes, done. Start doing things in smaller tasks and give yourself more time. Like even if you have 5 hours, then you can do 10 minutes for the next 5 hours. Just work on that. The other 15 minutes is yours. That was one of those things that actually made me more efficient, because I was actually getting bigger chunks done because I was actually working in smaller compartments and trying to, I get kind of obsessive compulsive about getting things done, hence the 6 hours of the one room in the video game. But I advise take smaller times and come back, because sometimes you actually do it better the second time. How many times have we lost a paper on the computer and we've had to rewrite the whole thing again? Because, back in the day before autosave, I've actually written a better paper the second time because my brain thinks it or prioritized. And it's like that to-do list. So thinking about, everyone out there, do you have any, how do you encourage your colleagues and even your students to manage their own mental and emotional health through all?
So the lists of things that you always have to do it's always changing and it's always flowing. I really like your idea, the 24 hours. I think that's perfect. I'm going to try that out. I'll let you know how it goes. But for me, I do my best to, when I have a bunch of things to do, right? Is it a today thing? Is it a tomorrow thing? Can it be next week? Can it be before the end of the month? And the key to it, at least in my opinion, the key to that is making sure you're staying true to your own code, right? So if I say before I go to bed, I got to get this done, it's got to be done. And if I push it to, tomorrow or next week or whatever, I have to do my best to make sure I assign that task when it's going to be done the first time. So that way I don't end up pushing it off. Right. Yeah. And procrastination, that is probably, at least for me, my biggest challenge is pushing things off. And sometimes you have to, right? I'm in the middle of a mood. I'm in the middle of a move, right? I'm not going to get every box unpacked tonight. I can't do it. It's not possible. And it's not happening. Right. But as long as I'm staying true and I'm saying, today I'm going to unpack 2 boxes. Tomorrow I'm going to do 1. Wednesday, I got a concert. I'm not doing any boxes. No progress is being made. Right. But I think you have to be reasonable for yourself, and you have to allow for life to happen and other things to take precedence or to come before or to be more important. But you got to take it day by day. You have to.
Not to scare you, but we're almost out of time. But I have a last question.
Let's hear it.
What's a way that you celebrate something for yourself? So, for example, you did all this. You've got to have some rewards to who you are. So if I do this or I get through the concert, I'm going to do this. Besides all the good stuff in life, I mean, what's something that entices you? Like, when I get done with this, I'm going to. Blah.
Yeah, and so my partner, I think, is listening. So this is going to be for later. Definitely take out. Get the Uber Eats, right? You stay at home, you chill out. And tonight, I think it's going to be some pizza. It's got to be that. And that's just my go-to, right? You get through a hard day, you get the takeout, you don't have to cook, you don't have to clean, you just eat it and you throw it out and you're good.
Oh my God, pizza is the biggest treat. I don't eat it enough. And my shopping center over here, they started serving whole pizzas and they're really good. So that was like actually one of my treats. I'll let myself have a pizza one on. All right. So your email is below. It's J Tovar, spelled Tovar. This is for our listeners at Salem, SALEMK12.org. So it's J Tovar at SalemK12.org. Got any questions? Anything? I always like this. Percussionist, I think you're super popular to me because I always have questions. But I'm sure you would be more than happy to respond to anything, but please use them. I always tell it to my listeners, please use them. So it is time for your final thought in terms of culture before content. What is the last thing that you want to say for today?
So you already said this, but I want to echo it. And I want to reference the great Maya Angelou, right? People won't remember what you told them, what you taught them, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. And if you think back as a teacher or when you were a student, if you think back to those times when teachers made you feel empowered, they fed into your curiosity and they made you aware of things that you didn't know about, right? That's what you have to try to emulate for your students today. And you're not going to do it the same way your teachers did it. And you're not going to do it the same way you did it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because everything's changing, right? People change, kids change. But as teachers, right, it's our job to make sure our students feel empowered to do whatever it is they want to do, whether it's studying music, whether it's becoming a music teacher, whether it's becoming an engineer, like whatever it is, they have to feel like they can build the skills and gather the tools to do the thing, do the job.
Well, you have been an amazing guest, my friend. I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was excellent.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And that is it for our guest today. Well, we have one more show in this season. Oh my gosh, we're coming up on episode 20. Let's talk about next week's guest already. Lincoln Rowe, band director at Ohio County High School in Kentucky. He's been there for over 10 years and is developing an amazing program. And I cannot wait to dive in to like kind of the final show before we come back in August. We are coming back. Just don't worry about that. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Culture Before Content here on the Music for All Podcast Network, where we are immensely grateful for Yamaha for their continued support as our national presenting sponsor. So just remind, if you're on Facebook, share. If you're on YouTube, share on your social media, like, subscribe, do all the things. But please keep coming back because you're making this our culture. Well, my name's David Duarte. I'm your host, and I hope to see you next week.